Hello and welcome to the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch Serman, and I'm thrilled to have you join us on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. This show is for those who are wanting to learn more about creating financial wellness, and we're going to look at different life cycles. We're going to explore them both financially and emotionally, because personal finances are actually more about the emotions associated with your money and not the money itself. And obviously, the more healthy we are emotionally, the better we tend to make decisions. And that's ultimately what we got to do a lot of as we go through a divorce. Although we might be somewhat general in our discussion, we'd love to hear from you. So please reach out to me. You can reach me on my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial. Or you can post comments or questions on YouTube, Facebook, or anywhere you might be listening to this podcast. A quick public service announcement. Today is the filing deadline, October 15th, if you filed an extension. So please get that in. It will help you avoid any late penalties. It will not help you with the interest or money you owe, unfortunately, but at least you can avoid those late penalties. So at the best of times, juggling personal finances can be quite challenging, and couple that with the stressful life cycle of going through a divorce, you're asked to make major decisions while maybe a little confused about your finances. For most, divorce is an unfamiliar process, a difficult process for many, and we're going to have, a lot of decisions that we got to cover, both covering our short-term and our long-term financial wellness for ourselves and for our family and for our future. So having an objective voice to walk the process with you, test your reality, help you communicate clearly is a gift and brings clarity. My guest today is Lisa Lisser, who is a divorce coach, the founder of LZL Coaching, has a podcast of her own. So a lot of insights that she's going to be bringing. And one of the things besides the wonderful insights that Lisa brings is a very calming manner in the way that she talks to you and the way she conducts herself. So let's learn how to look at our money, how to get some clarity through coaching. Lisa, it's great to have you back on the show. I appreciate you joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure to be here, Hirsch. Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So one of the things I always ask people, because I think it helps a lot in showing the passion and reason why they do what they do, I'm going to ask, can you share a little bit with the listeners as to your background and where your passion comes from?
Sure. So, like many of us, my background has had its twists and turns. So I started out as an attorney at a big firm. That was the beginning of my work life. But I left the practice when I started having children. I was working really long hours, and I just decided that for me, I wanted to become a full-time mom. And that's what I did for many years. I in addition to momming, I also did a lot of work in Jewish philanthropy. I became a public speaker. I became a fundraiser. I did program design and curriculum development. So I filled my life with lots of real meaningful work to me. And life had its twists and turns. And I got divorced, and that was a challenge. And it was not the image of what I saw for myself. So I went back to work, but my work at that time was focused more in the Jewish philanthropy world. So I did development work. But then I realized that there was something missing, and I went back to school. And when I went back to school, I went back to school for Jewish education. And I really wanted to teach Jewish adults what was the wisdom in our tradition, specifically about spirituality and how it could impact our lives today, how we could find those questions, the answers to the questions, and more questions about what we were looking for. And what I realized was that in that work, there were spiritual tools that could have helped me when I was going through my divorce. And I put that on a shelf because I thought it was something I wanted to use, but I didn't know exactly how. So I went deep into Jewish education. I wrote curriculum. I taught kids. I taught adults. I did a lot of that work. And then I heard about this thing called divorce coaching. And I'd never heard of it. And when I was going through my divorce, I thought, wow, I really could have used that guide on the side. So I flipped my career. I went into divorce coaching full time, and I trained and got certified as a divorce coach. And in this way, I blended all of my skill sets, my legal background, my divorce experience, my spiritual counseling, and my Jewish education to sort of blend those tools to support people going through this really hard time of divorce, which could be the most disruptive moment in their life to date,
Right.
and help them walk that path.
So I just got to cover a few things I think are so important of what you said. The number one is spirituality. I mean, I joke around. You've heard me say this before. I'm this cold, heartless MBA, CPA, CDFA, right? I used to laugh at self-care, and then I went through my divorce, and it changed my life. It helped me get through it in a very different way. That spirituality is so important. And I think so many people are missing that connecting outside of yourself and being able to get grounded and be able to get focused. It's real difficult going through a divorce at times to be focused, to really think of the future. And you were talking about seeking answers to questions. There are a lot of questions through the divorce world. So I think all of those pieces that you put together culminate into a very powerful offering of being able to help people through a lot of the things that are so desperately needed.
Yeah.
And I'm sure, by the way, firstly, I'm sure that you get a lot of people looking at kind of sideways when you say, oh, I'm a divorce coach. Like, what? Many people haven't even heard of a divorce coach. And I think a lot of people that have, they really don't understand the role that a divorce coach plays. So I'm going to ask, with all of that in mind, can you tell us a little bit about what is divorce coaching? What do you do? How do you help clients? Because I think getting some focus and understanding on that will bring clarity for people how to use someone like yourself and how important it is.
No, 100%. People do not know what divorce coaching is or how to use them. A divorce coach is that person who strategically walks you down the path and helps you make the best decisions for you in your divorce. The ABA defines divorce coach as that person who helps you walk the path of decision-making when you are perhaps least prepared to make decisions. Like in every other disruptive life experience, you're counseled, don't make big decisions. But when you go through divorce, you have no choice but to make big decisions. And the people who are guiding you, your lawyer, for instance, can tell you your options, but can't tell you what to do. They don't want that responsibility. And what the divorce coach does is he or she helps you walk down the path of each option so that you find the decision that's right for you. And the divorce coach helps you remember that you're actually capable of making these decisions.
Yes.
In many cases, you've forgotten that you have that power, or you've been told a story by the spouse that you are separating from that's been telling you, you don't know how to make decisions. You're not a smart person. You don't know anything about money. You don't know anything about child rearing. You don't know anything about that Phi Beta Kappa certificate on your wall. You're really not that smart. Right. Or whatever the situation may be, you're coming out of a traumatic situation and you've forgotten who you are. So the divorce coach helps you remember who you are and take off years of messaging that have disowned your internal power, and the divorce coach gives it back to you.
And I would say one of the things that that I said is pretty much every client. Do you remember who you are? You married for 5 to 50 years, let's say, anywhere in between. And there are people, like 50 doesn't, sounds, but there are people getting divorced. I have clients in their 60s, and I've had clients in their 70s getting divorced. We do forget. We give ourselves over to the coupleship, to the family, to the kids, and we often do lose who we are. Again, you packed a lot in there, so I want to elaborate a little bit. I think ultimately, it's your decision and your responsibility as the person going through and having the divorce. But I always recommend build a team. It sounds almost counterintuitive, but if you add the right professionals to the team, it will usually be cheaper with a better outcome, because you don't want to vent at $400 to $600 an hour to your attorney who's not trained in that, and it takes them away from helping you, right? So you want somebody in the mental health field to get that reality testing, walk through, help you decision make, or at least brainstorm around it and have the coach walk through with you. That's, again, not something that you want maybe an attorney. You don't want me as a financial expert doing legal work or emotional work. So really, there's so many pieces to this that become very, very important in coming through a divorce well, learning who you are again, focusing on the future, because you do a lot of decisions. And if you really understand, one of the things I do, I build kind of a priorities and values checklist with a lot of my clients, and it helps them focus. Anything outside of that is cannon fodder. You use that to get more of what you want that's important to you. And being able to have that kind of clarity and focus and working with the divorce coach, I think, is enormously beneficial going through the divorce. And the earlier you start, the more you walk through the issues and the concerns and the unfamiliarity. Again, when it comes time to actually make those decisions, you're so much better equipped.
I often refer to my role as similar to the primary care physician. Like, you have a primary care physician who knows the whole you and can refer you out to the specialist that you need.
Right.
So part of my role is to know who all the other specialists are that you need in a divorce. So I know you, Hirsch, as the CDFA. So if my client needs help with their finances, I can refer them to you.
Right.
And if I can see that my client needs more than a coach in their mental health space, I have therapists I can refer them out to. And when we look at, do they need an attorney? Do they need a mediator? I can refer them to mediators and attorneys that I know and that I work with. So now they have more. Later, I'm interviewing a certified divorce real estate professional. If they need to sell the house, if they need an appraiser, like, there's this host of people that are part of the team.
You have a support cast
that are beyond the lawyer. And like, for instance, when I got divorced, all I knew was that I needed a lawyer.
Right.
And when my spouse at that point said, "Oh, you don't need a lawyer, we'll just go to mediation and that'll take care of everything," all I could think about was, he's trying to manipulate me. I am a lawyer. I know I need a lawyer. And we potentially could have resolved it through mediation without lawyers. But I was so terrified that I needed to go the legal route.
Well, I think even understanding, you brought up another great point. You have options in how to go through a divorce. You can sit around a kitchen table, discuss everything, go to an attorney and have paperwork drawn up. You can go to mediation. You can go to court. There's such a variety of ways that you can do this. And understanding the pros and cons of each one. Where do I retain the power to say no? Things like that become very, very important. That helps you even pick the right professional. Because I tell people all the time when I refer a professional, I say, I vetted them technically. They're great at what they do, but they're still going to be the right fit. So, for example, you don't want to pick a litigator from an attorney perspective if it's very amicable and you think you can resolve this through mediation or another method that can be less contentious and much more cost efficient than going to court. So all of these pieces, I don't think people really understand, all the options. What do they mean? What happens if I do collaborative versus mediation. Collaborative is a great process for the right people,
right?
Not right for everybody, right? They say if you go to a surgeon, you're going to get cut. If you go to a rehab doctor, you're going to get rehab. It's a similar approach often.
And people have a fear with mediation without attorneys that they won't get represented well by themselves because they don't know what they're doing. But that's where the coach fits in. I have specific certification as a pre-mediation divorce coach, where I can do specific coaching toward the mediation so that my client is prepared and knows specifically how to approach the mediation so they don't feel power over by their soon-to-be ex. They feel raised to a power equal to. So,
and I think, sorry, one of the things that's very important, just talking mediation as an example that someone like yourself will do. I think often people have the wrong impression of what mediation is. Oh, we're going to go talk about it. The mediator will give us some suggestions. We'll come to a decision. That's really not what it is. Yeah. The role of that mediator is not to give you the solution. It's to facilitate that healthy conversation and move you guys towards a resolution. But, a lot of preparation should be done before you go to mediation. And I think that's often lost as well. It's actually one of the reasons I became a trained mediator was not to mediate. It was to help my clients get ready for mediation, because you do need to think about it. You do need to plan, what do I need? What am I willing to give up? How do I maybe position certain discussions? Things like that. All very, very important pieces.
Yeah, absolutely.
So let's talk a little bit about the finance side of things, right? I think a lot of things, even though they might not seem financial, they might have a financial undertone, right? It costs money to do something, right? Well, I want the kids for 2 weeks in the summer straight. Okay, great. There's a cost for that because you might be going away, or there might be more, we're going to eat out more, whatever it is. There's a lot of financial, that's a very elementary, I think, example, obviously. So what are some of the issues, some of the struggles you see people facing? And this, often this is different at different stages of the divorce as well.
So when people come to me, sometimes it's as basic as they don't even know how much money they have. Yeah. They get an allowance from their spouse, and they feel like they're going to be cut off if they even say the word divorce. And some of them have been cut off. They have a bank account that's joint, and the spouse puts money in, so they have only a certain amount of money they could spend each month. So they're terrified. They're in a financially abusive situation to start. So that's often the first financial issue that happens when I meet my clients. Right. And that's really challenging.
With that, I think, the spouse that makes all the money makes it seem like it's their money and you never contributed financially. That's another thing that I see a lot of, right? And I try to put a perspective to that, right? You have 3 kids and we didn't have to pay for daycare. Well, that's $50,000 or $60,000 sometimes through the year. And that's after tax. So that $50,000 might be $75,000, right? That you've now just contributed without really thinking about it, right? There's a lot of value that non-working spouse does contribute. And I think that needs to be recognized. Obviously, the power-hungry person's never going to recognize that. Something to think about. But the other thing that people...
I can interrupt you.
Go.
I love how you just monetized the caretaking for the kids, because that's a very concrete way to validate the stay-at-home parent who has felt invalidated.
Correct.
What I shared with a parent who said, my husband just thinks I'm a leech. I said, the reason that we have this alimony in our law is because the society believes that women the mother contributed to the family.
Right.
And society believes that there needs to be a system of support for the non-working spouse. So, but it's much easier to quantify it by saying childcare costs X and you saved the family X dollars by staying at home.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of ways. And I will say when I bring something like that up, it's amazing to see how much validation my client will feel when you bring that, because they've been sometimes for 20, 30, 40 years been kind of beaten into believing, and I don't mean it physically always, it's very often emotionally, that, you know, they're not contributing. I'm doing everything. You're just here. You're just a stay-at-home parent, right? I mean, there is so much that is engrossed in that becomes so important. I do want to come back to this. I just realized we are so over on going to a break. But when we come back, I do want to talk a little bit more about this, the issues, the concerns, the struggles, because they're very real. You're not going crazy, and we'll cover that more when we come back. But before, can you just share, how can people get in touch with you, if they want to learn more about your services?
You can find me at lzlcoaching.com. And you can make a 30-minute complimentary discovery session with me right on my website, or you can email me at lisa@lzlcoaching.com.
And we'll be right back. Thank you. Hello and welcome back to WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. This is the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch Serman, and today we have Lisa Lisser, the founder of LZL Coaching, a CDC-trained divorce coach and podcast host, joining us. I'm going to recap. There's no way I got everything we spoke about in those first 20 minutes. You shared a little bit about your background, and it kind of is amazing how the journey that we seem to take somehow all comes together and helps us in what we do at this stage of our life. It's amazing how that happens. We spoke about, and I'm just reading some of the scratch that I was able to put down. What is a divorce coach? How a divorce coach will walk the path with you, reality test, help you make decisions, help you understand the capabilities that you thought you had lost almost as well. We spoke about some of the financial issues and the struggles that you see. We're going to come back to that. The financial team, or should I say the professional team that you want to put together, the emotions, how big they are in all of this. And as you said, usually how you are told, don't make a large decision in a stressful time. And here you are forced almost into making the biggest decisions in a very unfamiliar and very stressful process. We spoke about how questions come up, how, we search things, whether it's spiritually, whether it's the answers to divorce, it's what's my life going to look like afterwards. I think sometimes we've lost our voice in the marriage. This, if ever was a time to get your voice back, it is now. Ask those questions, learn. The one thing I do caution people about that, a lot of people go to the internet. It's so easy to get information. Just make sure it pertains to you and is relevant to your life. Although there are sort of themes, I would say, in divorce, there are definitely pieces that are very individual in the process of divorce. So just kind of make sure that is happening. And then, as I said, we're going to come back to the financial issues, the struggles, things like that. One of the things I've had clients say to me, I want to get your thoughts a little bit. They'll go through the beginning, they'll be able to do all the paperwork, etc. And there's sometimes a lot of paperwork, the financial affidavits and the statement of assets and liabilities and everything that comes with this. And then all of a sudden they hit this wall that says, you got to make a decision. And they're like, how did I get through all the paperwork, all the details, all that? And I can't gather my thoughts on this. Or the flip sometimes. They struggle through the paperwork and then they come to having to make decisions or think about their life. And I'm sure these are pieces that you help them with. Tell me talk a little bit about that, if you would, in that. And I guess there's probably no typical client, but I'm going to phrase it, talk about a typical client or an example of a client.
Okay, well, so when you shared that, you made me think of one particular client.
Okay.
So I've been working with this one client, and she was telling me how she was struggling so much with all of the issues. And, but what it sounded like to me was that she was getting close to the end, right? She had done all the paperwork. The settlement was almost final, that all of the issues were close to being resolved. She was close to agreement. They were very close on most of the issues. And she still seemed to have the weight of the whole thing on her shoulders. And I looked at her and I said that, I said, what it seems to me is that as it gets close to the end, could it be that you're afraid of taking that first step forward?
Wow.
When it's over? And she looked back at me and then just took this deep breath and sat back and said, I think you got it. Because the whole idea, like, you're in this place that feels interminable. Like, you're never going to be outside of the whirlwind of the divorce. And then you're closer and closer and closer to it being over, to like selling the house, to moving to a new place, to getting a job, to taking care of your children. And it's all new.
Yeah.
And you're stuck. But the thing is, you're not really stuck. So that's what I share with my clients. Like, for the first time in years, maybe decades, you're looking at an open window. And that's like,
I hear exactly what you're saying, because it can seem very daunting. I've never done this before. Like, we were talking about the finances, and you said people don't even know their finances, right?
Yeah.
And I actually, over the years, created a program called Who Am I Financially? It runs through several pieces of your financial life, because people really didn't know who they were financially, because their spouse always took care of it, right? We kind of divide and conquer as a couple. I'll take care of this, you take care of that. And I've had people apologize all the time. And then we run through and I educate a lot. And, let's talk about a budget. Let's talk about your net worth. Let's talk about reducing debt or staying out of debt or whatever the cases are. And they get to that point where they're not quite sure they're ready to take it on. They know they've learned a lot. They don't think they've learned as much as they do, or whatever the case is. And I think, there's always something that in life that we're not going to know, that we're going to be unfamiliar with. But I think, and I'm sure you do this, I try to help people understand, don't look at what you don't know, look at where you've come from and how far you have come. Because that can be incredibly actually empowering and liberating. It's like, yeah, I've got this, because, 6 months ago, I didn't even know how much money we had. Now I know all the players in the, I know the Roth, the traditional IRA, the differences, how I'm going to do that, whatever it might be, right? The decisions that I've been making now for the last 6 months that I would never have even thought about. Those are huge steps moving forward.
They're huge steps. And sometimes I use some really coachy language, and I say, so tell me, what are your wins? Before we go into what's keeping you stuck, tell me, what are your wins? And when they start to enumerate the things that are better, all of a sudden there is a new awareness.
Right.
And I don't do that in every session. And, some coaches start every session with, so tell me your wins this week. And in divorce, that's not always the best way to start a session, especially when people feel sometimes demoralized when they're walking into my space. But sometimes that's exactly the right thing you need to do. And when people can't see what's going right because they're feeling consumed, like, I don't know, sometimes I'm thinking like when I would go to my therapist and I would think, so what problem do I have to discuss with them? Right? Like I have to think of the really hardest problem. And people, I think, do that when they come into a coaching space as well. So if I can reframe it
right,
so that they're telling me what's going right, then they're hearing their voice.
and it's amazing because sometimes that win is I was able to get dressed for our meeting, and other times it's like, well, I paid off 6 credit cards and created a budget and whatever else it might be. So understanding that I love what you're saying. It's moving forward versus a win, because a win, it comes and goes almost, but moving forward and keeping that momentum is so key. So we are running out of time. I do have 2, I guess, one's a question following up on something you said, and then just one other after. But you said, for example, you play quarterback or doctor, I think is actually the way you put it, and you have these referrals. So I'm a financial professional, obviously CPA and a CDFA. How do you kind of look at a situation and say, I think this person's ready for, or I need to bring in a financial professional or whatever it might be, right? What are some of the indicators there, and what are some of the specific topics that clients, or you might have clients think about as they're going through their process to kind of get them, thinking forward?
So sometimes a client's financial story sounds fishy. And I hate to use that word, but
Right.
My client tells me that they had to sell the house because her husband told her they were going bankrupt. And they had to move in with her mother,
Right.
whose house they owned. So that was a second property. And her husband was a financial professional. And then at the next session, she tells me that their troubles started when her husband got $1 million signing bonus when he went from one firm to another. So now I'm hearing that there's like a financial inconsistency. So I'm like, do you have a CDFA? I think that's what you need.
Yeah.
And so that's when I bring someone in. Now, every situation isn't like that, but sometimes I hear from clients who don't have a handle on their financial situation. Their husband has been totally responsible, and though they're on an allowance. And I'm like, I think maybe this is the time for a financial advisor. And so that's when I bring someone in.
Right.
And even if they only have their tax returns and that's the only thing they have access to, you can find out a lot of information from a tax return. And I have learned that. And I've learned that a CDFA can learn a lot more sometimes than a forensic accountant who's hired by an attorney.
Right.
And so when I'm balancing what can my client afford, or what does my client think she can afford? And I do have male clients, but most of my clients are female. Then I look at the CDFA first and the other professionals later.
Right.
So that's when the story sounds inconsistent.
Right.
And that's when I think they need to have some financial guidance.
No, it makes sense. Makes a lot of sense.
And what's frustrating is I feel that the lawyers should also do that. And I say that from personal experience. 12 years ago, my attorney never told me I needed a financial advisor, and I never had one until 5 years ago. So I know that I left money on the table. Now, I'm fine. But when I look at based on what I know now, if I was, backseat driving or whatever, the word is, I forget, but it could have been different. And so I want my clients to not have that backward view. I want them to take charge now.
And I think sometimes it's also just the reassurance that, sometimes I don't know if there's something going on.
Yeah.
And, and I'll tell you, from somebody who does both CDFA work and forensic work, I will never, and I tell clients this all the time, I can never guarantee I'm going to find something. I can tell you that most people think they're a lot smarter than they are, and they tend to do what the guy next door did. So a lot of things really do pop out pretty easily, pretty quickly. Yeah. But you can never actually guarantee I will find something if there's something there. That's number one. I think the other piece is sometimes just the education of it. If I deal pretty much exclusively with women, not by design, by default, because that's usually the situation where the husband is usually the one still managing the finances. Doesn't mean they're doing it well by any means, but I find that sometimes they need to understand a budget, maybe not know dollar for dollar where it's going, but understand a budget, understand your net worth. Those are things that are important. I had one client, and then we really do have to wrap up. I had one client who said to me, I'm going to come out with about 1.8 million. That's pretty good, right? And I said to her, I don't know. And she looked at me like, you're the finance guy. What do you mean? I said, are you going to spend $250,000 a year, or are you going to spend, $100,000 a year? Because at $250,000 a year, you got about 7 years. Obviously there's interest, but,
right.
At, 100,000, you've got 18 years. I mean, that's a very big difference, So obviously just understanding your whole financial picture is a very important piece.
Right.
All right. I have to wrap up, but I do want to take one more minute because I want you to share a little bit about your podcast, because that's a great podcast also. So,
thank you so much. Yeah. So Dishing on Divorce. I bring on guests who are all different kinds of divorce professionals, from CDFAs and forensic accountants like you, Hirsch, to matchmakers. I'm having a matchmaker in a couple of weeks on my Dishing on Divorce Next Chapter show on Wednesdays. And I'm 3:00 today on Tuesdays and 12:00 every other Wednesday. And what I try to do is demystify the divorce process and give people the tools they need that they don't know they need, so that they can walk through the process more confident that they're taking the right steps forward. And, I think all of us are in this work so that we can help people move through with confidence and heal a lot faster.
Definitely. I encourage everyone to listen to it. You can find Lisa at lzlcoaching.com. And there's a lot more information out there. So I do encourage you to go. I am Hirsch Serman, your host for the Financial Wellness Hour. I appreciate you joining us today. And you can reach me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial. Lisa, thank you for all the great information. CC Schatz, behind the scenes, thank you for all that you do, making the magic happen. It's very appreciated. And we will see you in a couple of weeks. Thank you all, and have a great week.
Thank you.